Thank you very, very much, everyone, for joining. We're absolutely thrilled to have Niklas with us. Niklas, just checking you can hear me loud and clear.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for being here. I think everyone by now knows, hopefully, the context of My First Minute, which is an informal series of interviews with some of the world's top founders turned investors. And my name is Spencer Crowley. I'm the co-founder of First Minute Capital. We're a seed fund based in London. Absolutely thrilled to have Niklas with us today. My only piece of housekeeping, well, perhaps two. One is for you, Niklas, which is your audience is a mix of early stage entrepreneurs from all over Europe, many, many different sectors. And you have obviously lots of friends, both as CEOs and fellow founders and also VCs joining us. We're actually streaming on Founders Forum Live as well. And then the only piece of housekeeping is just a quick heads up for everyone. Some upcoming ones. We've had an amazing lineup so far with the founders of PayPal, King, Supercell, Indeed, Unity, Trulia, MuleSoft, MongoDB, TalkDesk, OLX, many more. Yesterday we had the brilliant Herman Hauser of Arm. Tomorrow we have Sir Clive Woodward, England's World Cup winning rugby coach and head of GB Olympics in 2012, or director of sport rather. And then next week we have Sir Martin Sorrell, Tony Blair, David Bonderman, Nelly and Max Levchin, and then more to come with Jess Lee of Sequoia and Jenny Fleiss of Rent the Runway. So really, really exciting lineup. None more exciting than today. Niklas, perhaps even before I do your intro, I would like to start with a thank you, because First Minute owes its first minute to you in many ways. For those of you not familiar, Niklas and Brent, my co-founder at First Minute, have been great friends for many, many years. And Niklas, through Atomico, was the first investor in First Minute. So Niklas, thank you for, well, my employment, I guess, indirectly.
Thank you.
But Niklas, I think, is best known to everyone here on the line as co-founder of Skype and the founder and CEO of Atomico, the venture fund. But you have founded many other businesses too, Niklas. We'll touch on some of those later. But my count was 6. Is that about fair in businesses that you founded?
Not sure. Something like that.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But also, Niklas is a known environmentalist. And with his wife, Catherine, is the founder of Zennström Philanthropies, a non-profit that supports organizations combating climate change, and is also president of the European Tech Alliance, and in general has been a central driving force in European tech. So lots and lots of ground to cover. Niklas as a founder and his early days, Niklas as an investor, and more broadly some thoughts on things that you are thinking most about. But maybe very first of all, Niklas, how has your lockdown been? Are you missing traveling at all?
Yes and no. I think all of us. First of all, fantastic to be here. Thank you for this great initiative. And it was easy to say yes to this, and a great opportunity to share with a great audience. So really looking forward to this period. Yeah. So the lockdown's been interesting. It's been a time of self-reflection, of, I think personally, but also how we as a society and we as a human race are living. And in the beginning, I'm sure everyone has gone through ups and downs. And in the beginning was like crisis. Then it was kind of excitement, and it became a routine. And now we're kind of, this is over 8 weeks now for us. So I think a little bit like, yeah, it would be great to go out and see people and touch people and go places. So, but this whole, what's interesting though is like it's been really a forcing function for us to take a minute and think and slow down, and realize, like, we have all been flying around like crazy, going to this meeting, to that meeting, in the traffic, and going to different countries because we have to be everywhere. And I think we all have this fear of missing out, and we need to be out there and touch things. Personally, I usually, with travel, I get a lot of excitement. I get a lot of energy because there's new inputs, but it's also kind of doesn't make you kind of stop and think. So this is a really good opportunity, at least for myself, to kind of pause and think a little bit about where we're going. So, but the lockdown has also been an opportunity to get these routines that you don't really have because you're also busy. So yeah, lots of making sure training every day and getting my steps in and taking a break, but way too much screen time.
Do you miss the office at all?
Yeah, I miss the people in the office. But yeah, I really miss it because it's funny when I've been away travel and on a break. It's always nice to be away, but it's also great to be back because it's all about working with a team that makes me tick and makes me get energy. So of course we're still working in a team, but it is not the same thing on a video. But it's
we were just talking actually before everyone joined us about some of the pros and cons and work from home, and obviously lots of people are pleased with some of the efficiencies of work from home. But you, Niklas, you definitely lose some of the subtle, tactile, sort of intangible communications that happened every day between teams.
Yeah, for sure. I think that it's hyper efficient. I think it's and many of us said, and I think that's like everyone I've been speaking to, and I'm sure everyone here agrees with, is that we're surprised that we became so much actually more efficient. But I think this is in the short term we are more efficient, but I think in the long term, if you would work 100% from home and 100% remote, I think that long term it wouldn't be as efficient. I think there's risk for people to burn out, and there's risk for people to there's longer time. We have made this investment in meeting a lot of people, and over time that is kind of they get weaker and weaker. So I think that maybe we should rethink this thing when we go back, and how we think about travel and meeting. Maybe it is going to be more about when we meet each other and when we travel to see each other, we can do it less often, but have more quality meetings and have more for relationship buildings. And when it's more about transactional things, we can probably do it remote.
Has there been a daily habit that you've developed in lockdown that you're going to try to keep post when we're all back in the world?
Yeah, I think so. I think that I would, I haven't really gotten there yet because my plan is that there's going to be a lockdown for quite a while for us all of us who are able to work remotely will continue to work remotely for a foreseeable time. But for sure, I'm going to certainly change some of the things I'm doing. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to not be flying around to every board meeting that I need to attend. I'm going to kind of speak to all the CEOs and say, listen, why don't we plan for some board meetings to be in person and have them more quality meetings and maybe with a dinner and get to know each other, and other board meetings we can probably do over video conference. So I think that's for sure one thing to implement. And also, I think also configure a lot of things for video calling. Use a simple thing as our meeting rooms. Is that what I realized is that is that when we're all like now we're all on a video, whether it's Zoom or something else, there are other services for video conferencing. I assure you of that. But then we're all on equal footing. We're all equal. We're all focused. We're all remote. But that's normally what we end up with, is that a bunch of people, probably the majority of people in a meeting room, and then a few people remote, and then the acoustic is not so good, and the camera from that meeting room is not so good, and then that pulls down the whole quality of the meeting. So I think it's almost like you want to try to get either all on video or all in person. That I think is going to be a good shift.
Definitely. Well, we're going to come back to a few of the points you touched on in terms of travel when we talk about some of the, hopefully the positive impacts of COVID-19 and the pandemic, because I know how passionate you are on the climate. Maybe first, before we go there, Niklas, we might journey back to the late 1990s and your sort of first entrepreneurial minute. We'll perhaps fast forward. I know you grew up in Sweden and you studied computer science and engineering at a university just north of Stockholm in Uppsala, and then had a year at Michigan. Your first job, if I'm not mistaken, was at the Kinnevik Group under the late Jan Stenbeck.
Mm-hmm.
For those of you not familiar with the late Jan Stenbeck, inherited a large conglomerate and spun out some amazing businesses from Tele2 to Millicom and many others. How did that first gig come about for you? How did you land at Kinnevik?
Yeah, so I didn't get a job at the consulting firm. Actually, I got like, maybe some job, but it's it was a job to first of all, like, I'm kind of disclose how old I am, but I graduated in 1991 when it was a huge crisis, economic crisis in Sweden based on property that caused the whole crisis. Was a deep crisis, and people came out and from really good universities, engineering degrees, could not get a job. Back then, everyone wanted to work at Ericsson, which was the hot tech company back then. But then we graduated and people could not get job. I was studying abroad, but I responded to this ad to work as an assistant to the CEO for Kinnevik, which was really back then a very, very disruptive entrepreneurial company to challenge monopolies in telecoms, challenge monopolies in television and newspapers and several other industries. So that was something I learned from, joining this startup of maybe 30 people that was going to challenge the incumbent telecom operator. And the other thing this company was doing was also pioneering, providing internet connections, so an internet service provider. I think was the second ISP in Europe. So that was really interesting to be part of that kind of disruptive business. I think that's where I learned a lot about being working with trying to be disrupting kind of status quo and challenge status quo.
And was there anything in your exposure to the way Jan Stenbeck, operated that made a lasting impression on you?
Yeah, for sure. And it was about, always a challenge, and it's like asking the questions, why is it, why should it be the way it is? Why can we not do it easier? Why should those incumbents be entitled to be incumbents? So that was one thing. But the other thing was also always focus on customers and always kind of keep things simple.
Fascinating. And I know I've heard you speak before about how even the concept of venture capital didn't really exist then, and this was pre-web browser days. And
yeah, listen, back then we didn't know, like, entrepreneurs, like what it really was, and we didn't know. Venture capital had no clue what it was, and Silicon Valley was a very, very distant thing, because there was no books about it, obviously no internet, so you couldn't really know about it, and if you were not there.
Well, Niklas, before we go on to the creation of Atomico, because I know that was partly driven by wanting to fund some of the brilliant entrepreneurs appearing outside of Silicon Valley when you started Atomico in 06, 07, but to maybe go to February 2000, and you've resigned from Kinnevik. This is right before the dot-com bubble burst. Kazaa was your first business. Your first pitches to venture capitalists, what were they like?
They were depressed. So we, me and my co-founder, we decided to leave, to resign, like basically Christmas break '99, and so I resigned in I think, February, something like January, February. Yeah, so I left in February 2000, which was like a few weeks before .com crash happened, and we were kind of fiddling around with a few different opportunities, and eventually that spring settled on what became Kazaa, which was a file sharing software. And one of our inspirations was Napster, which was really taking off big time. We thought we could do something different. We thought we could do something much more broad, much more universal. We thought we could build a search engine for any kind of media, and then the best, most efficient delivery platform for that, which would be peer-to-peer, full peer-to-peer technology. And we thought people could use that for audio files, for video, shareware, and any kind of large media files, because back then the internet didn't have so much capacity. We thought it was great, and so we started to try to meet with VCs in Europe. And first of all, there were not that many of them, and second of all, they were all depressed because the .com kind of they were suffering the dot-com kind of early, the dot-com crash was happening gradually. And the other thing what happened was that because we were inspired what Napster was doing, and Napster started to get more and more kind of legal trouble from recording industry in America. And we tried to position ourselves that we were doing something different. And actually, we tried to work with the record companies, and we had end-to-end private key infrastructure. We said we could provide pay-per-play, we could provide advertisement, we could provide a subscription service, and we can work together with you. So the business development people that they loved it, but the lawyers didn't like it so much. So there were a few VCs, but there were very, very few. But then they saw this kind of the two things. It's like one, the Napster's legal issues that could affect us, and the dot-com kind of crash happening pretty quickly. So that was painful. So we ended up raising about $0 from VCs.
Was that informative for you as an experience when you started Skype? Would you say you were a resilient entrepreneur without knowing it when you started Kazaa already, or would you say when you started Skype you had a slightly hardened skin?
Yeah, I think I became quite resilient for sure, and I think you need to have grit. You cannot take no for an answer. You need to kind of keep on fighting. And between Kazaa and Skype, there was Jolted, which we didn't even try to raise, and we kind of bootstrapped that. But we really thought that when we went out to raise money for Skype, that we would be successful, because Kazaa was very successful in terms of users. It's like, there was like the most downloaded software, consumer software, the most downloaded software ever online, like 400 million downloads. Like everyone used it. And we had kind of done that in a bootstrap way. And the other thing we got a check from quite early on from Bill Draper. Mm-hmm. So the father of Tim Draper, who was like one of the early, like one of the first generation of kind of Silicon Valley venture capitalists. So we thought, okay, we had success with, at least we kind of proven that we were, we were touching some success with Kazaa, although it ended up, we gained nothing from it. And we had Bill Draper betting on us. It was like $100,000. But that's like, wow, this is going to be easy, to raise money back on this. But it turned out to be really, really difficult. I think we went around all VCs and business angels in Europe, and we got no's from pretty much everyone.
And this was 2002 now?
Yeah, 2002 and 2003, yeah.
Okay, got it. And just for those not familiar with that founding story, it was born, I think, out of your frustration with telcos and how they're charging a lot for roaming. Perhaps the question I'd like to ask, Niklas, is how did you have the belief that you could bypass these huge global telecom services and companies and build something of your own?
I think this is all kind of a continuation from the first experiment with Kazaa, which was, the technology behind Kazaa was pretty powerful, was very powerful, because it was a true scalable peer-to-peer infrastructure with private key infrastructure. So you could really kind of manage content and users in a very secure way, and it was really scalable. So you could scale something a platform that could distribute any type of file in real time without any kind of servers, and it's a very reliable, resilient system. So we had at least a very, very strong belief that eventually we figure out the right application to use this technology for. We also learned something from Kazaa when we were probably too disruptive, because we could not appreciate the impact that these would have and the reaction that music and movie industry would have. Because back then, they didn't really believe that the internet would really take off. So the modus operandi from them was to, whenever some upstart came into doing some kind of online music, they didn't want to license anything, and they went to sue companies. and that was the kind of, and they thought that by doing that repeatedly, they would kind of scare off entrepreneurs to do something there. The reality back then was that consumers loved to consume music online, but there was no service for them. So what we learned there was that you need to understand the counterparties that you're working with, and you know, we also kind of learned, you know, through a massive litigation that, you know, it was a borderline situation, where the rights are and how. So we ended up eventually settling that. So it was all good, but it was hard to build a viable business and raise capital if you also kind of are running too much risk of being litigated. So when we figure out to do Skype, we realized this is perfect because this is much bigger of an industry. Mm-hmm. And while the telecom companies may think that they're entitled to the monopoly, they have no right to be a monopoly. Back when I was part of as an young first-time employee at Tele2 challenged the monopoly. And in Europe, for those who remember back then, who were there was actually a legal monopoly throughout all of Europe, pretty much. Mm. That it was state monopoly, had a monopoly on all telecommunication services, except a few countries. For example, Sweden did not have a legal monopoly, it was just a de facto monopoly. That's why Tele2 could start in Sweden. So that was kind of one of my core insights there, and that actually, you know, there was no monopoly anymore, so we could do something that was very disruptive. And you know, we know that people love to consume music online. The other thing we know that they want to do even more, whether it's online, but they want to have a remote way of talking to each other. And if they can talk to each other in a high fidelity way and maybe also see each other, and if you can do that either free or at a fraction of the cost of telephones, that could be a game changer. We thought that's a pretty big opportunity. You know, we thought that there's an opportunity to disrupt the global telecommunications services, and it's completely legal. In fact, when we got going, the European telecom regulator was really cheering us on to kind of be more aggressive and to push harder. But in some countries, of course, the telecom companies were not happy with us. Sure. The ones who were running retail, mm-hmm. But actually we became a really big partner of the wholesale divisions of a lot of telecom companies, because we also provided this Skype out and Skype in service. So where we provided traffic to them to terminate on telephone networks. So we were partnering with the telecom companies at the same time as we were disrupting them.
So for those early stage entrepreneurs taking on big incumbents, it's understand your counterparties in great detail, avoid litigious incumbents, avoid monopolies, and somehow try to partner with the people you're taking down. That's sort of a couple of points.
I think, yeah. But you know, how I felt about these monopolies, I felt then that monopolies is like, it's an entitlement, like, you know, if you look at these typical monopolies, they sit there and they're trying to kind of squeeze more from the consumers because they can, and yes. They don't necessarily provide a great service. So
did you see yourself as an underdog? Did you take pride in being an underdog?
Yeah, for sure. That was one of the kind of things that got me going, because I always thought that what we're doing was ultimately something that would be really beneficial for end customers, for consumers. And these telecom companies were overcharging, right? Because, you know, back then, you know, they use an old-fashioned, you know, tariff. The longer distance you call, the more you paid, and you paid per minute. But when you have digital infrastructure, there's virtually zero incremental kind of cost. So why should you charge like that? They charge like that because they could.
Yeah.
So I thought it was our kind of, you know, right, almost our duty to kind of to fix that.
Well, I think safe to say you did fix that, and we fast forward a few years, and most entrepreneurs are happy with one multi-billion-dollar exit. But you sold Skype twice, famously, first to eBay in 2005, then you bought it back, and then you sold it to Microsoft in 2011 for $8.5 billion. Perhaps the only last question on Skype, Niklas, is, you know, this is obviously the last couple of months we've seen more people around the world use video conferencing than ever before. What's it like for you? Is there a sort of a wistful moment where you think of what, you know, of the company that you created, and obviously it's had a new journey under Microsoft? What's it been like?
Yeah, you know what, like I've always gotten that question, what do you think about Skype now? And you know, I'm so proud of Skype and what we built with it, and what it meant for people who are using it. And the thing that's always been most happy with is when I'm meeting people, and admittedly fewer now than in the last 10, 15 years, who say thank you so much for Skype, because it enabled us to stay together as a family. I can see my grandparents, my grandchildren, my loved ones, and that's always been like the kind of the thing that I think, to me, that brings most joy with it. So, and you know, we did really well on it. So as founders and all the investors did really well. So and of course you want to see your legacy thing that you built continue to be successful. When we started, we said we want to build something. When we created Skype, we want to build something that can be a pillar on the internet for a really long time, for like 15 years or so, you know, which is a long time, you think, but actually not that long time. And you know, the fact that, and you also know that, you know, typically when big tech companies are acquiring something, it's going to kind of be integrated, and it's going to be kind of changing shape, or maybe losing its name or something like that. So, you know, so it's natural that there's.
Niklas, you've frozen for a moment, but I'm sure we'll get you back.
Yeah,
you're back. You're back.
Yeah. Okay. So what I was saying, that, you know, you have these waves of disruption, and technology companies are being created when there's an opportunity, because there are a new technology platform. So the platform that we could benefit from, that we had the perfect timing, was broadband, because that was the time when we shifted from dial-up modems to broadband at home. The other thing that happened was Wi-Fi.
Yes.
And then the kind of the PDAs that you could have, the mobile with pre-smartphones. Those were enabling technologies that we could benefit from with Skype. We did not invent voice over IP. The previous generation's voice over IP was designed for kind of modem connections. Mm-hmm. So we benefited from that. Although the vision for Skype was always to be on mobiles.
Yes.
But the implementation really was for, and how we became successful was for like kind of desktop or laptop computers.
Yes.
So then there was two other kind of technology transitions that happened. One was mobile first, yeah, where messaging apps like WhatsApp became much more easier to use than Skype for messaging, because it was designed for mobile first. Mm-hmm. And you have something like Zoom, which is for video conferencing, which is designed for the cloud first. So while actually both of these type of services are carrying on the vision that we had for Skype, yes, you know, I think it's completely natural that there's later implementations that are much better, because they're being built for that generation of technology. Did
Eric Yuan ever reach out to you for advice when he was?
No. You don't have to, I think.
Optimistic. Niklas, Atomico, I think, is known to everyone on the line, but in case not, Atomico is a venture fund based in London with a global footprint, and just raised its fifth fund in January, an $820 million fund. And Niklas, the question I've been very excited to ask you is take us into the Atomico IC, and obviously founding stories, products, market size, underlying technology. These are all things that you deliberate in huge detail before you make the investment. But you personally, as an investor, let's help some of the founders who will pitch you one day. What do you tend to jump to first? Do you ask them why they're doing this? Do you ask them about the underlying technology? Like, what's your default first way of the lens with which you view an investment opportunity?
Yeah. It's a hard one to get right, actually. Most of the time we get it wrong. If we get it right, you know, 1 out of 10 times, we're doing really well. So for me, it is about the founders. It's always when you look back, when you do a good investment or a bad investment, it's about the founders. It's a key thing. And what I would be looking for are, what are they solving? What are they big problems that they're going after to solve? And how can they solve that in a sustainable way? Where, and can they articulate a clear path how to go from where they are now to get to their vision? I think that's the kind of the key thing. And I also look for, are they able to articulate how the world is going to look like in the future and how they're going to get there? But also look for, are they great leaders? Are they able to recruit and attract people who are even better than themselves? Can they they get some really, really excellent people who help them to build that firm?
And if we unpack that founder first mentality, how do you look to assess the DNA of the founders that you meet?
Yeah, I think you need time. And I think this is one of the challenges now when we are all remote and trying to assess these things over video calls. I think the best thing to get there is to spend time with founders in different settings, and also to spend time with them, with their teams as well, and see how they are working with the teams, how comfortable they are with allowing the team members to speak, and how you can see that the team is kind of saying the same kind of story, but from or things, but maybe from different kind of perspectives. I think it's also kind of looking into how I think integrity is actually key to this, because I really do think that in today's world, if founders doesn't have a very, very strong North Star, a strong integrity, they're not going to get there, because they're not going to be able to attract the best people. So
you're also a huge convener, Niklas, of entrepreneurs, whether it's at home, whether it's with some of your passions of skiing and sailing. You bring entrepreneurs together in lots of different environments. Is part of that because you like seeing entrepreneurs in different environments?
Yeah, I think we want one of our kind of key words that we use internally is relationships before transactions.
Okay.
So we think, like, how can we build relationship with founders, and that's kind of, you do that very well outside. When they come to pitch, they're there to pitch, right? Sure. So you need to build relationship with founders before they're gonna come to sell to you. And then that's when you can get to know them. But we also try to be helpful, with help founders and give them some advice beforehand. And that's also a good way to interact, and also for them to get to know us. They say, like, are we someone who they want to have as an investor? The reality is that, the best founders, they have so much choice. They choose who they want to have as an investor. So we're going to have to be very humble, and we have to demonstrate to them that we can be a good partner to them.
And do you think some of the things that you were referring to earlier, whether it was some of the Khazar battles, whether it was Juice that you just briefly mentioned that was a project that didn't work, do you think those experiences help make you individually more founder friendly, that empathy with the downs as well as the ups?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, like, I don't know, like the best before date is like one of those like long shelf life products, but I would like to think that there's so many other things, and I think for the approach that we have is also, we have a team approach. It's not so much me. I can maybe be the one who can sometimes open a door.
Sure.
But when they get to meet some of my colleagues who can really help them with expertise, whether that help them with how to build an amazing team, how to build a great scalable go-to-market strategy, how to do your communication strategy, and all the other people we have in our team, that's really when they get, wow, this is some people who can be really useful. So
course.
My stories might be good to kind of, get them to take a phone call, but then it's really the other people in the team who are really adding so much more value.
Well, I'd love to come back to that kind of full suite of services that Atomico offers. One last one, Niklas, on your filter, let's say, as an investor. Something I think about a lot is, are certain investors more likely to spot certain defining traits in other people, in other entrepreneurs? And might there be a certain blind spot that certain people might have? Do you feel you've got the benefit of a brilliant and large team around you at Atomico, but are there certain types of founders, if I can call it that you think you might struggle to pick more than others?
Yeah, I think because we really think about this as a partnership, because it's a long-term journey, and you cannot fire your investors. So you're going to be stuck with your investors for a long time.
I think there are a few founders on the call who wish they could, but yes.
Yeah, no, sure. Listen, I'm with you. I get it. And then some investors want to fire their companies sometimes, and that's when it goes wrong. So it's really important to have an alignment on where you want to go long term, have alignment of that long term vision, and kind of some of the values that you have and how you want to get there. And therefore, when the time we struggle, and when founders come to us and say, well, we're gonna go, we're doing the rounds, and we can see you for an hour and a half, and then we have a process, and we want to have yes or no term sheet next week. You can get another 1 hour follow-up call. That's really hard for us because it becomes a transaction. And so we really trying to get to know founders first. I think it's completely fine that, they get, so as a founder, it's not a bad thing to do that, by the way, because you want to make sure, I'm kind of talking against myself here a little bit, but as a founder, you want to make sure you get a good deal. Sure. I'm not sure you want to get optimized the best deal, because I think you want to make sure you get the best partner and you get a deal that is a good market deal.
Of course. So
you can use a competitive process to put pressure on maybe you pick 1 or 2 investors that you really want to have because you believe in them, you have a shared vision with them, and you can develop, you feel that it's a good rapport. But it's probably not a bad thing, and I'm probably going to be killed by my colleagues now, but it's like you want to, if you don't have any kind of competitive pressure, you might not be doing a good job negotiating. Yeah, but then you should probably not pick just the one who offers you a little bit higher valuation. You should probably just use to get there. But my point here is when this becomes these really transactions, that's where we struggle. The other thing is also, we're really looking for founders who have a purpose.
Yes.
Who are building companies which actually can help us to create a better future, a more sustainable, more inclusive world. And if they're, so the companies that we would struggle with are those companies that would be exploiting the world and extracting value for themselves and not contributing.
And Niklas, that dynamic between purpose and profit is something I absolutely want to double click on. And we've already got a swathe of great questions coming in already. Just sort of 2 areas I just want to very quickly touch on. And the first is an extension of what you were just saying. One thing Zennström Philanthropies is an amazing thing that you set up with Catherine. Atomico, by its nature, has to be a capitalist entity because you have LPs and your fiduciary obligation to those LPs is to make the money. How do you think about that? Hopefully it's not a trade-off, but that dynamic between purpose and profit.
No, it's a good question. I think it used to be a trade-off back in the day. When I had corporate finance, then you learned that the purposes of business is to optimize shareholder value and stay within the law, and then it's the lawmakers to make the law, and then you can exploit as much as you want, as long as you're maximizing shareholder value.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's still valid, but how you think about optimizing shareholder value is maybe different now than it was 20 years ago. I think that today, in order to optimize shareholder value, first of all, it's not short term, it's long term. It takes time to build a successful business. So you need to always have a long-term perspective, specifically when you're building a startup and when you are a venture investor. So by default, the horizon need to be long-term. Short-term, you can probably make a quick buck by being kind of unethical and exploit things and trick someone into something, and you sell something. That's the transactions. But this is about what we're engaged in is supporting founders who are building lasting businesses.
Of course.
So, and today it's very much about attracting the best talent for your team. The companies who can attract the best talents are the ones who can be successful. And we all know that from several studies that talent today much rather work for companies that has a purpose, companies which have a strong ethical baseline, and companies that are actually being positive for society. The other thing we know is that consumers much rather buy from companies which are providing services and products in a sustainable and ethical way. And also on enterprises, we also know now that more and more for big enterprises, they're looking into that they want to have suppliers that are ethical, that have sustainability and human rights on their agenda.
And how, with that, Niklas, I know you sit on the H&M board, and something you've thought deeply about. Obviously fashion is one of the big contributors of climate change through waste, etc. How do you, there are lots of CEOs of large companies on the line. What sort of hope do you have for some of those larger players in terms of their approach?
I think that there is, I'm not going to comment too much on H&M other than that it is a company that is, obviously it's one of the leading fashion companies, but it's also the company that is in that industry is getting continuously highest grades from independent bodies that they are in terms of sustainability and in terms of climate and human rights. Now, there you have multiple, so climate is obviously, now we're all, obviously being in a crisis situation with COVID and economical crisis as a consequence, but we'll fix this. This is a short-term situation. The house is on fire. We're gonna deal with the fire. We're gonna rebuild the house. And when we rebuild the house, we're going to build a better house. We're going to build a house which is sustainable and is much more inclusive. But the long-term challenge we have is the climate. And we're already in the 11th hour. We need to halve the emissions with 50% in the next 9.5 years. And unfortunately, we're losing some time now. But now for large corporations on the board meetings, they're fully aware of this now. It was maybe 5 years ago, a lot of companies were not aware of it. Some companies were aware. I would say that H&M has been aware of this for a long time.
Yes.
And what is interesting here, I think, is that it's also the long-term view versus short-term view. If you have a family-run business, you probably take the long-term view because you're thinking about your next generation, because the family business, H&M is a public family business. Mm-hmm. If you have, and again, this is more general talking here, but I see this with other family-owned businesses. Family-owned businesses have a long-term view because they think about the next generation. Therefore, now also when you have a younger generation who are now at the helm of that company, so maybe the people under 50 years old, maybe 40 years old, 30 years old, they get it that they need to be sustainable. So typically those companies are very progressive when to transition the company that they've inherited to be much more sustainable. And if they don't, they're going to be disrupted.
Yes.
So it's a matter for companies, so for incumbent companies to be able to survive long term, they just have to put climate really, really center on their agenda. So, and what's great now is that they see this pressure from consumers that they need to do it. So it's no longer that this is a push because of regulation. This is good business. So incumbents realizing now good business is to be trying to be green and reducing your climate footprint as much as possible. If you're not going to be around. And
we see that even at the early stage of the talent magnets that companies have, which are really deeply, genuinely mission focused, is fascinating. I'm super keen to open up to questions. There are two very quick ones I have for you, Niklas. And actually, I recommend to everyone, if they have time, there's a great piece that Atomico published on conscious scaling, which talks about the context of returns to society and not just to shareholders. I posted it in the chat there, which develops some of the themes that Niklas has been alluding to. Two very quick ones, Niklas, for you. A question from Brent, which is the next physical founders forum, who would you like to sit next to that you haven't met before? Brent is listening, so he'll be taking notes to this.
All right. You can tell Brent, he knows that much better than I do. I leave it to him. He's the ultimate networker. He knows who I should sit. So I leave that to him.
Okay, you're not helping.
No, but listen, what I always excited about is to meet people where I can get inspired by, and what I get inspired about people who are, founders who have a big mission and an ambition. Mm-hmm. and are kind of disruptive. That's why I get inspired with. So yeah, so that's the person I want to sit next to.
Okay, broad remit there, Brent. And then the second one, finally, Niklas, is there something that you're not good at that you wish you were good at?
Is that from Brent?
No, that's from me.
Yeah, so I'm not really good with we all have, strengths and weaknesses. I think my weakness, I'm not like the best networking person. So like if I would go to an event, like that's why I hang out with Brent, because I ask Brent who I should meet and he tells me who I should meet because he's so good at that. So yeah, so I'm not the best in kind of networking, otherwise, yeah, I wish I could play, musical instrument much better. There's a lot of things like, I wish I was a better investor. There's a lot of things I wish I was better with, but I think
piano, guitar.
But we cannot be great in everything.
That's musical instrument. I'll take as the I think better investor.
I really suck at it.
Niklas, we'll dive into questions, and I know there's one straight up from Morgan of Accelerate Her on a topic you're very passionate about and have written lots about. Mm-hmm. Morgan, hopefully you're unmuted, so over to you if you can hear us to fire away.
Hi, Niklas. Thanks very much. You mentioned good business is sustainability, and actually, I would argue good business is also diversity.
Yes.
And Atomico has done a huge lift in terms of filling the data gap in Europe on the sort of ecosystem of founders, and specifically as it relates to diversity. So, a thank you for that. It's a huge lift for the industry. But my question is, can you elaborate on any of the specific actions you and your leadership team have taken to weave diversity into your investment strategy, and any of the positive impacts these changes have had on your portfolio performance?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And thank you for bringing this up. One of my worries is now when we're in the house is on fire. Well, the house on fire, yes, well, when this pandemic crisis is that there's a risk that we forgetting about the very, very important work and the momentum that we all started to get on important issues such as diversity and inclusion. So I think it's really, really important that we continue to be focused on that, because we don't have the right momentum yet. We're still very, it's very, very early days. The technology industry and the venture industry has done a pretty poor job, including ourselves in the past, in thinking through diversity and inclusion. Personally, I always thought that we were inclusive and we were open-minded, but then it turned out we realized a few years ago that we were not doing a great job when we looked at our portfolio and we looked inside ourselves in our firm. So we decided on a few things. It's like, first of all, admitting that, like, yeah, we have not done a good job. And number two, we can do better. So let's do better, and let's put some objectives to ourselves. So we set out objectives both in how we source and how we invest, and also in our team. So we set an objective to get parity in the team, but also it takes time because cannot tell people, sorry, we're going to have to get rid of you because you're a man. So this is a thing that takes time. So when we're hiring now, we're always making sure we have kind of 50-50 on our hiring, and that's how we can build for the future, to have a team that have parity on at least on gender. But of course, diversity is not only gender; it's so many other things as well.
And Niklas, I'm going to shortchange on that one, just because we've got so many questions for you that I want to squeeze in as many as possible. But actually, there were two pieces that I will also post on that, because Niklas has written at length on this. Nick, Lauren, thank you so much. Morgan, thank you so much for that. Sorry, Morgan's colleague is Laura Stebbing, who I was just talking to earlier today. Nick from Vita Mojo, you're unmuted, and a question I think you have about post. Nick's being summoned back to the board. Hi Nick, how are you?
I'm very good. I'm so excited to see
you were summoned well. Your question for Niklas, I think, is about investment thesis post-COVID.
Yeah, I mean, so much of the world has changed in a way, and the question is, how has your view of the world changed with this? Has your thesis changed? The kind of companies you target?
Yes, it's a very good question. So I think, like, there's a short term, which is kind of during the financial economical kind of recession that we have entered into, and then there's like what comes out on the other end when things normalizing. At the end of the day, when you take a step back, what we want to engage in is disruptive innovation with disruptive technologies, disruptive companies. And I'm going to try to make this not too long. But so when we're looking at, when I talk about, like with Skype, it was some external things that happened. It was broadband. Sometimes there's like this, it could be technology that enables disruption, and it could be a change in behavior in consumers and businesses. Now, what we're experiencing right now is like the ultimate disruptive event. There's so many legacy, incumbent businesses that are now trying to accelerate their transformation to digital and to online in a very, very rapid pace. They're trying to kind of use this lockdown and to turbocharge the transition so that they can be much more online oriented. That's a huge opportunity for technology companies to benefit from that. Consumers are changing their pattern as well. So that's another way to think about what are the companies that would benefit from when consumer and businesses are getting online. So that's certainly one thing we're looking at. But the other thing is also, because we're getting into now a recession, you need to think through what are discretionary spending. So you're probably going to see, us and other VCs looking at more favoring companies that are helping their customers to kind of to save money, rather than when there are something that is completely discretionary. So I think those are the kind of two kind of key things we're looking at.
Super. Nick, thank you for that. There's been a nice back and forth in the chat as we were speaking, Niklas, triggered by your comment about relationships and then transactions and how founders should think about that. And a question from Anish, who should be unmuted already, is with regards to the duration of a venture fund's life and whether that's fully aligned. And actually, the week before last, we had Luke Nosek, the PayPal and Founders Fund co-founder, who's his fund, a Giga Fund, is trying a longer duration, and evergreens are not easy to raise for venture capitalists. But Anish, you should be unmuted if you can hear me, so fire away.
Hi, Niklas. Yeah, so the question really stems from the idea. Now, you talked about in your own journey taking on monopolies. I'm sure a bunch of us are also trying in our own ways to take on different monopolies. And occasionally time is what we need the most here.
Yeah.
And if a fund has a 10-year life cycle and a couple of extensions, maybe get it to 12.
Yeah.
Is that enough to build a large publicly listed company, or do we need a different model for VC altogether?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, it's a good question, and it's a question that is being discussed from time to time. And it's the 10-year and with the 2-year extension is just something that is there by default, and it probably should be longer. But going and going, the limited partners many times are big pension funds and big institutions. That's hard to kind of convince them to change. But I don't think it's a big problem. I think my advice would be that when you build a company, you should really have a long-term view. But you also need to look at what are the kind of the milestones that you can build into your business, and also that you can kind of have accretive value. Now, and it used to be that companies went public earlier, and then VC firms could get some kind of liquidity in the IPO. Today, what you have much more now of a developed secondary market. So I think, when a company, when a VC firm investing, maybe holding something for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, the company may not have fulfilled everything, have so much more upside, but a fund might say, like, listen, this is a good time for our fund to exit this opportunity, when a large mutual fund want to come in and put as much money as possible. So it kind of works for normal type of investments. I think something like what Luke is very much going ahead of many others and looking at these really big bets. We have a few of these kind of big bets, what we call it kind of frontier investments. We invested in electric.
I think as you were freezing, you're back, Niklas. I think you were just about to reference Lilium, I think. But
yes, exactly. We invested in electric, like Series A in Lilium, which is electrical airplane. PsiQuantum, which is making quantum computers. GraphCore, Memphis Meets, a lead from Founders Forum, which are doing growing meat in labs. These are kind of companies that might take 6-7 years from start to launch. So then you need to think very differently about how you can get value accretion, and your exit horizon gets much longer. But we think that those are completely fine to do with a 10-year plus 2 venture fund. But we will kind of have a balanced approach. But we also need to see a lot of kind of typical enterprise SaaS companies and consumer companies, which kind of have faster volatility as well.
Sure. Niklas, do you have time if I take them 2 more? Would that be possible?
Yeah, sure.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for overrunning slightly. Benjamin Cohen, who's CEO of Pink News, which many of you will know, has, I think, over 50 million global uniques every month across its different platforms. Ben, you should be unmuted. Can you hear us?
Yes. Hi, thanks very much. And this has been really, really interesting, particularly being on the Zoom call with the founder of Skype. It's not something I imagine. But I guess my question is, I'm interested in your view of this, both as a founder and also as an investor, of the challenges of raising a first round if you have bootstrapped a business and it's been successful for a long time. That's the situation that we're in. Pink News, as we said, it's got tens of millions of users. We've been completely bootstrapped for 15 years, but we've seen really tremendous growth recently, and we have an opportunity to, because of COVID, to kind of move into more of a platform business rather than a content pure play business.
And so is the question specifically with regards to when, or what's
I'm basically wanting to understand, like, what is the challenge? Because there's one VC that I've spoken to for 6 years about investing who always jokes to me that I'm never going to take investment. I'm always going to keep on trying to just bootstrap.
Sorry to interrupt, just to be super specific with the question, just because we're running out of time.
The specific question is, what are the challenges if a business has bootstrapped when the VC is looking at it?
Yeah. First of all, congratulations, well done. That's like, because if you bootstrap the company to become successful without investors, it's hard. It's not every company can do it. So you have optionality. So I think the first thing to ask yourself, why? Why do you want to take in money from VCs? And of course, it can be good to get, so when you get capital that enables you to grow faster, so that could be great. So you can build a bigger pie and you can become a more successful company. You get dilution. The key, what I've experienced with when there are kind of companies which have been formed without investors and without a VC, it's, what you need to find the right, you need to have an alignment with that VC, with the people there, how you want to continue to build the company is something that they need to be comfortable with. So I think there are two things. One is kind of governance, because you probably just run the company. I don't know, like, do you have a board? Maybe you don't even have a board. Now you have like institutional investors, like we need to have board meetings, we need to have reporting, we need to have governance. And that could be uncomfortable, but it can also help you to set you up for success long-term. That's one thing. The other thing is kind of liquidity, because you may say, like, and this is what I'm asking you, you really need to think through what you want to do, because if you don't have investors who are going to kind of at some point push, like, yeah, we need to have some kind of exit at some point. You say, why? Because, you can build this into, a family business. Maybe you have dividends and then, someone else runs the business in the future. So I think those are the kind of the two key challenges. But there is also an upside. Obviously, like, there's a great upside because it can really help you to accelerate your company. You get more perspective. You get investors who can help you with introductions, with a network, and really accelerate your business.
Super. And actually, it's Benjamin, thank you for that question. Sorry for cutting you off. The final question is actually a follow-on from Benjamin's question, which is you spoke earlier, Niklas, about whether to be truly aligned, and how would you advise those founders on the other side of the table to make sure that alignment is really there? I think it ties nicely together a few of the comments you made.
I think, well, spend time with your investors. Don't just go for a pitch and then ask for a term sheet. Spend time with them, but also do a lot of references. You should really, really speak with founders who've been working with that firm, and specifically with the partner you're considering. I think those are the best things. And then you should interview them. You should interview your potential investors, how they think about the future and different scenarios.
Brilliant. Well, Niklas, thank you so much. We had, I think, a Zoom of about 300 people and lots more from LinkedIn. And so really, really grateful to you for taking the time. And thank you for so many frank and thoughtful insights, which really
appreciate it.
Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Spencer.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, bye.